a visibly humiliated Donald Trump may have just suffered the most embarrassing interview of his political career, in which his interviewers repeatedly interrupt him by laughing in his face at his lies. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as you know, humiliating Donald Trump is a lot of fun. I think it's a moral good. I think we should see more of it, given that Donald Trump is an authoritarian, malignant narcissist who represents a threat to this country. On the other hand, I really struggle with secondhand embarrassments. One of the reasons why I don't like watching reality TV, watching people get mocked and humiliated on stage, I get embarrassed for them. Sometimes even Donald Trump, which is why it's hard for me to watch his speeches. Well, Donald Trump sat down for an interview with the Flagrant podcast, a very popular podcast hosted by comedian Andrew Schultz. And the disconnect, between an irreverent comedian interviewing a former president of the United States could not be more stark, because Trump was repeatedly laughed at to his face, not because he said something funny, or at least intentionally funny, but because he was lying and rambling and incoherent and saying comically stupid things, that he was repeatedly interrupted with laughter. And at various points, you can see Donald Trump, visibly chagrined, like he's looking down, he kind of trails off. He's not used to this. So we're going to play some of these clips and unpack them together, but it's pretty bad.
I have a hard time doing it to them because I'm basically a truthful person. But frankly, I have a hard.
Do you see that? Like they laugh in his face. You're a truthful person. They are overcome with laughter, and he's like trying to continue. Well, frankly, and then he looks out. He wilts. He visibly wilts and trails off because he's not making a joke. He's trying to dishonestly convey that he's an honest person. And these, centrist comedians, and Andrew Schultz has, I'm trying to think of the podcast that he's hosted. Maybe with Charlemagne the God. I've seen him and Charlemagne the God, who's the host of the Breakfast Club. They have either a shared podcast or they've repeatedly done joint efforts. And Andrew Schultz is inclined to grade Trump on a curve, but even Schultz finds it so categorically ridiculous. And you can just see Trump crumble in real time. We've got other clips, but also as a reminder, the polls constantly show that Donald Trump is by far the more dishonest candidate, no matter who he's running against. When President Biden was the presumptive nominee, Biden scored much higher in terms of honesty and integrity and trustworthiness, despite MAGA Republicans' desperate efforts to paint him as a corrupt politician with the failed sham Biden impeachment inquiry. And it's the same thing with Vice President Harris. If you look at polls, they regularly show that she dominates him on character attributes like honesty and integrity. The recent New York Times Siena poll, which we discussed recently, has her beating him in this respect by 11 points. And that's despite the full weight and power of the MAGA media machine trying to paint her as a chronic liar and flip-flopper. Donald Trump is not honest. He is objectively more dishonest than any of his peers, and even the polls reflect it. Some other clips I want to show you in which Donald Trump, these are two back-to-back clips, where Donald Trump tries to convince the podcasters that he's actually a communicative genius. And, when people say that he's rambling and incoherent, I'm doing the weave. It's a brilliant technique. And I want you to see their reaction.
And so it's one of those things. I was saying before, though, that, I do a thing called the weave. Yeah. And there are those that are fair that say, this guy is so genius. And then others would say, oh, he rambled. I don't ramble. If I start a story, what you do is you weave things and you do it. You have to have certain things. You need an extraordinary memory because you have to come back to where you started.
Yes.
A weave is only good if you come back.
They would give you credit for that.
It's true.
Then you can go all the way over here and then get back.
I can go so far here or there. And I can come back to exactly where I started. And
do you see that? They're laughing so hard at his dishonesty that they're literally kicking the air. They're leaning back and uproariously laughing. And you can just see the visible discomfort as he tries to keep talking as they're interrupting him with heckling laughter. So embarrassing. But it gets worse because then he goes back to the weave later on. He tries to bring it up. See that right there? Guys, don't laugh at me. That's an example of the weave. Check it out.
Dwight Eisenhower was sort of a moderate, General Eisenhower. Did you know that they had 8% generals, president of the United States, 8% were generals, 92% were politicians, and then you had Trump. See, that's a weave. You know, we go off it just
I
for
like
a second.
that.
So,
Because now I'm like, where are we weaving to? I'm into this.
no, think of it, because we're talking about generals, and then you get back onto the general.
There you
Because
go.
what I was going to say is that Eisenhower
I like the
is a
play-by-play
moderate.
for the weave.
No, it's good, though. Isn't it great? We go into it, we mention Eisenhower, and then I say he was a general, 8% generals, 92%, and now you go back, okay? It's part of the weave, you know? Then you go back. No, you got to
Finger
keep
roll.
it all together. You got to be sharp. If you're not sharp, you're dead. Think of it. Think of it. Dwight Eisenhower.
He can't see that they're making fun of him in real time. Like, oh, okay, the weave, huh? Yeah, you see, it's the weave. So, like, we're talking about Eisenhower, who was a president and a general, and then I bring out, this piece of trivia about how, previous presidents were generals and others were politicians, and then there's Trump. It's not a weave, sir. That's a tangent, okay? And it's probably an incoherent one at that. And again, they laugh in his face like, okay, sure. So, again, he's being made fun of. He's being mocked. They clearly don't respect him, nor should they, given that he is a failure of a president, an ideologically inconsistent buffoon who is indeed incapable of a coherent conversation and certainly answering questions honestly and with coherence. But there were also other points, too, that I want to draw your attention to, other questions that they asked and points that he raised. We're going to play some of these clips.
What about Mike Pence? You got anything for Mike Pence?
Well, it's a shame because he and I had a very good
What happened to him?
relationship.
Hanging out somewhere.
He couldn't cross the line of doing what was right, in my opinion. Some
yeah.
people would disagree with that, but he had the right to go.
What about Mike?
So Andrew Schultz, I saw him in a Charlemagne the God appearance where, they talk about, January 6th and threats to democracy. Schultz knows what happened to Mike Pence. Again, he's just kind of teeing him up just to see what Trump will say. And then, of course, Trump says, well, Pence didn't do the right thing. By the way, again, worth noting, J.D. Vance has repeatedly publicly said if he was in Mike Pence's position on January 6, 2021, he would not have certified President Biden's victory. He would have facilitated a coup of Donald Trump's to get him into a second unlawful term. So again, it's important to remember that when you go to cast your ballots, that if you vote for Trump and Pence, which is your legal right, I think it's silly, but it's your legal right to do, you would be voting for a man who tried to coup the government and a man who said that had he been present for the first coup attempt and been in a position to impact the outcome, he would have facilitated the coup that his boss wants to conduct. Pretty pathetic stuff. Again, worth noting, too, that Trump seems to believe that I think he had the right to overturn the results of the election. See how he tried to say that at the end? Well, if Trump wins the 2024 election, you know who the vice president is during the 2024 election? The Mike Pence, the person in Mike Pence's position and will be on January 6, 2025, Kamala Harris. So does Donald Trump believe that Kamala Harris has the right to overturn a free and fair election? Would he support that? Should she just unilaterally toss out the votes and say, actually, no, I think I'm going to make me the winner? Of course not, right? Because this is a right that only Republicans believe Republicans have and would never tolerate it if a Democrat exercised it. Thus, again, proving that they are unprincipled, cultish losers who should be made fun of. Last clip I want to play is Donald Trump saying something about the United States of America that had any other Republican at any other time ever said, it would have been the end of their career and perhaps still might be the end of a career for a Democrat. Here it is.
Like my legacy to be is the same as the term MAGA, Make America Great Again. I'm going to make this country great again. It's not a great country right now. It's loaded up.
It's always a great country.
It's a great country.
See, that's
It's
why I
always a
disagree.
great country.
Okay, but like
He disagrees. And again, even these podcast hosts who are laughing in his face get serious enough to say it's always a great country. The United States is profoundly flawed, and it was certainly more flawed back in our history. Some serious sins and war crimes and crimes against humanity, and serious flaws that even now need to be addressed. But we have always expected for decades politicians to have an affirmative vision of the United States and to not denigrate the country, to criticize it when needed, to promote progressive change when needed. But here you have the leader of the Republican Party, the patriotic party, the party of family values, the pro-America party, actively, and not for the first time, publicly saying that America sucks. And again, in any other time, that would have been the end of a Republican politician's career. They would still try to end a Democrat's career. Vice President Harris said something to that effect. But really ridiculous stuff. And again, what I want to say is this just goes to show how diminished Donald Trump is, right? Because he's going into this podcast and he's so bad. He's so unhinged. He's so rambly. He's so incoherent. He's so openly dishonest that he is such a clown. These comedians are laughing in the face of a former president of the United States, mocking him in a way that I expect they never would for, say, President Obama or President Clinton, or maybe even President Bush. That's how much of a joke Donald Trump is. This was probably the most humiliating interview that he's ever conducted. And again, you can see him in real time, just like almost like insecurely crumble, like, oh my God, they're laughing at me. I'm just going to keep talking, but I'm just going to slowly wilt. Pretty pathetic stuff. He absolutely deserves it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.